From San Francisco, this is Democracy Now!
Today we're here in San Francisco, the largest anchor march for a rise for climate, jobs, and justice. Today we are here ahead of the Global Climate Action Summit to call on Governor Jerry Brown and elected officials at all levels to step up on climate action, phase out fossil fuels, and push for a just transition for 100% renewables.
And people march in San Francisco calling for climate justice ahead of California Governor Jerry Brown's Global Climate Action Summit.
So to Governor Brown, I would say this is your last chance. Make sure that when we're talking about fossil fuels, that there are no new permits that are going out for new drilling, because we know that the impacts that happen in our most vulnerable communities are a part of that process. So you have a responsibility. If you want to be a leader on climate, if you want to be a leader on the environment, then that means you have to be listening to the voices of our most vulnerable communities.
From the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March, then to the fight over Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
I find it impossible to reconcile what you're regularly being told, that your testimony that you received nothing stolen, had no reason to suspect anything was stolen, when, frankly, as we now know, Republican staffer Manny Miranda stole things. And some of the things he stole went directly to you.
Speak with former top aide to Senator Patrick Leahy, Lisa Graves. Her new piece in Slate is headlined, "I wrote some of the stolen memos that Brett Kavanaugh lied to the Senate about." She's now calling for Kavanaugh's impeachment as a federal judge. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Activists held hundreds of protests Saturday in more than 90 countries as part of a worldwide day of action demanding urgent action to address climate change. In France, tens of thousands of people joined climate marches across the country. In northern India, about 10,000 students and teachers tied red ribbons to trees in an action to end deforestation. In the Philippines, nearly 1,000 people marched in Manila to protest the country's reliance on coal. In New York City, 10 activists were arrested protesting in front of Governor Andrew Cuomo's office to demand New York State transition to 100% renewable energy. In Thailand's capital, Bangkok, about 200 people protested outside the UN regional headquarters, including fishermen and laborers whose livelihoods are threatened by rising sea levels. In Australia, demonstrators demanded a halt to plans for a $16 billion coal mine in Queensland. And here in San Francisco, up to 30,000 people marched through the streets to demand urgent climate action. After headlines, we'll play voices from that protest in San Francisco. The Syrian government, backed by Russian airstrikes, is continuing its offensive in Idlib province, the last major rebel-held part of Syria. Residents and rescue workers say the Syrian government's been dropping barrel bombs on apartment buildings, killing civilians, including children. This is Hervé Roussel, a spokesperson for the World Food Programme.
The single greatest priority must be to end this brutal conflict. WFP appeals to all parties to protect civilians, respect humanitarian principles, and allow for the safe delivery of food to families in need, no matter where they are.
Former President Barack Obama has slammed President Trump, calling him a threat to democracy who capitalizes on politics of fear and resentment. President Obama's speech at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign was the kickoff to a 2-month campaign effort ahead of November's midterm elections. This is former President Obama speaking on Friday.
So Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas like a higher minimum wage. They're running on good new ideas, like Medicare for all, giving workers seats on corporate boards, reversing the most egregious corporate tax cuts to make sure college students graduate debt-free.
Sentenced to 14 days in prison for lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians during the 2016 election. Papadopoulos is the first Trump advisor to be sentenced as part of a special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into the Trump campaign's ties to Russia. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is calling for senior Trump administration officials to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. This is Warren speaking on CNN.
If senior administration officials think that the President of the United States is not able to do his job, then they should invoke the 25th Amendment.
President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, is expected to announce today the United States will adopt an aggressive stance against the International Criminal Court, including threatening sanctions against the court if it tries to investigate alleged war crimes committed by U.S. troops in Afghanistan. In Bolton's speech today to the Federalist Society, he's also expected to announce the closure of the Washington, D.C. office of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, as retaliation for the Palestinians' efforts to bring alleged Israeli military war crimes to the International Criminal Court. Israeli soldiers shot and killed 2 Palestinian protesters and wounded more than 200 others in Gaza on Friday during the Palestinians' weekly demonstrations along the separation fence with Israel. The Palestinian Ministry of Health says the Israeli military has killed at least 179 Palestinians and wounded over 19,000 more since the Palestinians' nonviolent Great March of Return protests began on March 30th. The New York Times is reporting Trump administration officials held multiple secret meetings with rebel Venezuelan military officers last year to discuss plans to overthrow Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The secret meetings about a possible coup included a Venezuelan military commander who's on a U.S. government sanctions list of corrupt Venezuelan officials. The Times reports the discussion stalled after Trump administration officials reportedly decided not to assist in a military coup in Venezuela. An Egyptian court has sentenced 75 members of the Muslim Brotherhood to death in a mass trial over the 2013 sit-in protests against the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. Amnesty International slammed the mass trial as a grotesque parody of justice. In Iraq, massive protests continue in the southern city of Basra, where protesters torched the Iranian consulate Friday. The demonstrations in the oil-rich region began after thousands of residents fell ill from contaminated water. Residents are demanding more jobs and better public services, including clean drinking water. Les Moonves, the longtime head of CBS, has resigned, only hours after the New Yorker magazine published an article detailing a slew of new sexual assault and sexual harassment allegations against him. In July, 6 women accused Moonves of sexual harassment in a New Yorker article. Then on Sunday, the magazine published a second article in which 6 more women accused Moonves of assault and harassment, including saying he forced them to perform oral sex on him, that he exposed himself to them without their consent, and that he retaliated against them professionally after they rejected his sexual advances. One woman, television executive Phyllis Golden Gottlieb, filed a police complaint against Moonves, accusing him of physically restraining her and forcing her to perform oral sex, and in a separate instance, physically throwing her against a wall. The New York Times reports Moonves could walk away with as much as $120 million in severance pay from CBS. The New York Times reports the CIA is expanding its drone operations in Africa, including expanding an air base deep in the Sahara. The widening CIA drone war in Africa comes after President Trump restored the CIA's powers to conduct covert drone operations, which had been curtailed under President Obama following widespread outrage about civilian casualties. The nationwide prison strike came to an end Sunday, following nearly 3 weeks of work stoppages, hunger strikes, sit-ins, and commissary boycotts in prisons from coast to coast. The nationwide demonstrations demanding better conditions, the right to vote, and the abolition of what prisoners call modern-day slavery ended on the 47th anniversary of the beginning of the Attica prison uprising in upstate New York. In Florida, a white Dallas police officer has been charged with manslaughter after shooting and killing a 26-year-old black man in his own apartment. The police officer, Amber Geiger, entered Botham Sherm John's apartment and opened fire, killing him. Police claim the officer believed it was her apartment. She simply walked into the wrong one. She was released from county jail on Sunday night on $300,000 bond. Investigators have taken a blood sample from the officer to test for drugs and alcohol. This is Botham Shermjan's friend, Jessica Berry.
Just knowing the way that he died, it seems unfair because, think of the nicest person that you know and the most generous person that you know, and then they get shot as if they were a criminal or a thief. And it's just not fair.
In sports news, tennis superstar Serena Williams accused umpire Carlos Ramos of sexism during Saturday's U.S. Open final. The umpire harshly penalized Williams after she called him a thief and a liar, which Williams says is different than how male tennis players are treated by umpires. This is Serena Williams speaking at a press conference after the 2018 U.S. Open.
I can't sit here and say I wouldn't say he's a thief because I thought he took a game from me, but I've seen other men call other umpires several things, and I'm here fighting for women's rights and for women's equality and for all kinds of stuff. And for me to say thief and for him to take a game, it made me feel like it was a sexist remark. I mean, like how he's never took a game from a man because they said thief. For me, it blows my mind.
In more sports news, NFL players continued to protest during the national anthem Sunday to call attention to police brutality and racism. Among the players to protest were Miami Dolphins wide receivers Kenny Stills and Albert Wilson, who knelt during the anthem, and Dolphins defensive end Robert Quinn, who raised his fist during the anthem. Colin Kaepernick, who first sparked the league-wide protest, tweeted his support for Stills and Wilson, writing, "My brothers continue to show their unwavering strength by fighting for the oppressed. They have not backed down, even when attacked and intimidated. Their courage will move the world forward. Love is at the root of our resistance," Colin Kaepernick tweeted. And scientist Jocelyn Bell Burnell has been awarded the Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics 50 years after she made a historic astronomical discovery, only to have her male advisor take credit and receive a Nobel Prize for her work. The special award comes with $3 million in prize money, which Bell Burnell says she's donating to the UK's Institute of Physics. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from San Francisco, California, throughout the week, the site of this week's Global Climate Action Summit. Activists held hundreds of protests Saturday in more than 90 countries as part of a worldwide day of protests demanding urgent action to address climate change. Here in San Francisco, up to 30,000 people took part in the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. It's believed to be the largest climate march ever on the West Coast. The protest came just days before the start of the Global Climate Action Summit being organized by California Governor Jerry Brown. Well, on Saturday, Democracy Now! Was in the streets of San Francisco.
Tanu Yakupitiage. I'm with 350.org. And today we're here in San Francisco, the largest anchor march for a Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice. Today we are here ahead of the Global Climate Action Summit to call on Governor Jerry Brown and elected officials at all levels to step up on climate action, phase out fossil fuels, and push for a just transition for 100% renewables. There's over 260 events happening in 50 states plus Puerto Rico today, and over 900 events in 90 countries. So it's a massive mobilization across the world.
You're talking about global climate justice. Jerry Brown is holding a summit on this week. Do you applaud him for this?
We need more than just empty rhetoric, and so it's not enough that these elected officials from all over the world are just meeting to pat themselves on the back. We're asking for tangible commitments, and we want to see that out of the summit. And so this gathering of tens of thousands of people in San Francisco, hundreds of thousands around the world, is really calling for tangible action in a time where climate impacts are massive.
What do you want to see here?
We want to see commitments at the Global Climate Action Summit to phase out fossil fuels and commitments from cities and states across the country to 100% renewables that supports workers and anchors racial and economic justice.
What about Governor Brown's reliance on oil in the state of California? For those who don't have oil in their state or don't understand California when it comes to oil, explain.
Yeah, absolutely. So Governor Brown, California is the third largest producer of oil. This is impacting communities not just in California. For example, we had the Sariaku from Ecuador here. The oil that is being extracted from Ecuador is refined in California. And so this is an issue that's beyond just California. And so when we call for the phase out of fossil fuels, this is ultimately about everybody's health, everybody's safety, everybody's ability to live in the communities that they want to live in.
Good morning. My name is Ambrose Carroll. I'm the senior pastor of the church by the side of the road in Berkeley. And I, too, rise for climate, jobs, and justice. When it comes to air pollution and climate change, low-income communities, communities of color, and other marginalized groups bear a disproportionate burden. Ignoring these truths and spurring our obligation to protect the most vulnerable among us is morally wrong. For example, black children are 4.5 times more likely to be hospitalized for asthma and 10 times more likely to die from asthma than white children. My 10-year-old son, Ambrose Jr., is playing football this season in the Snoop Dogg League. We live in West Oakland, which is the transportation hub of the region that leads to and from San Francisco, where our air quality is impacted by pollutants stemming from factories, Bay Area rapid transit, ships, trucks, trains, planes, and automobiles. Ambrose Jr., you see, struggles with asthma. And so although he plays, we monitor his QVAR intake and we watch his play closely. We pray that he and other little children grow out of the condition, and we will march today in order to alleviate their discomfort. We rise today because all sentient beings deserve the right to breathe, and because we believe that black life matters.
Our next speaker, Miriam Cisneros, President of the Quechua people of Sariaku in Ecuadorian Amazon.
Quiero decirles a todos ustedes, hombres, mujeres, ancianos, ancianas, niños y jóvenes.
I'd like to say thank you to all of the men, women, elders, and children who are here. I come from Sariaca, Amazon in Ecuador. I want to tell all of you that I come from those forests, rivers, lakes, and mountains that have life. I come from there where the human being and Mother Earth live in harmony. I come from Casac Sacha. I come from the living forest. I also come from a people who has fought for years and years the threats of oil exploitation. I come from the land where we have defended millions of lives, and today we are here to leave you with our Casac Sacha proposal, Living Forest. We are here in this huge march, brothers and sisters, from throughout the planet, because we have understood that we must leave fossil fuels underground, both in the Amazon forest as well as in the whole world. We are also here because we want the world to know that indigenous communities like ours, Sarayaku, possess innovative solutions, such as our own proposal of Casac Sacha, a permanent protection of all forests and life in our ancestral lands. The world requires just and noble solutions, such as this one, to confront climate change. And also, we ask for respect for our indigenous rights, self-determination, and our autonomy. In this way, we can guarantee the life of humanity and to live in peace.
La autodeterminación, la autonomía para garantizar la vida de la humanidad y vivir en paz.
Meu nome é Ninauá.
My name is Ninauá.
Eu sou do povo Runicuim.
I'm from the Runicuí people.
Do Brasil, estado do Acre.
And I'm from the Brazilian Amazon in the state of Acre.
Estou aqui para me juntar a vários povos indígenas e outros povos.
I'm here to unite with other indigenous peoples and the peoples of the world.
Para trazermos aqui uma luta em defesa dos direitos.
Because we're here to defend rights.
É dia em que os governos vão estar aqui reunindo para decidir pelo futuro do nosso povo.
The governments are going to hold a summit to decide the future of the world and the future of our peoples.
futuro que vem através do dinheiro, que são...
Their vision of the future is just about profits, making money.
Que é uma coisa que está contaminando.
And they make money by polluting and destroying this world.
E nesses dias que estamos aqui, vamos trazer aqui essa mensagem, essa voz verdadeiramente da floresta.
So I'm here to bring the voice of the Amazon rainforest to this discussion.
Our next speaker is Rudy Gonzalez, the Executive Director of the San Francisco Labor Council.
So in California and in the union movement, we know that climate change is real. I'm going to say that again. Climate change is real. I represent over 140 unions and 100,000 union workers in San Francisco. And in California, we've seen the real impact. The fires at the car fire. Our firefighters and our electrical workers are on the front lines, and recently we've even seen some of them go to work and not come home to their families. They and members of the community have lost their lives to this very real threat. And we're at a crossroads here, because after the fires, we know that it's our construction workers, iron workers and steel workers and carpenters and electrical workers who will rebuild our local economies and our communities. So when we talk about standing together to fight for climate justice and jobs, we have to talk about that old principle of solidarity. We have to stand together on these issues. I can tell you that the big corporations are trying the same tactic on us as a large community as they do to union workers every day. They offer a false choice. They say, choose between better wages or better working conditions, or choose between a secure retirement or affordable health care. And in the union world, we say no to that choice. We deserve all those things. And in the same way, we deserve a clean and peaceful planet for our generation and for future generations, and we deserve good union jobs. We can have good jobs and a clean planet.
Voices from Saturday's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. We'll go back to the streets of San Francisco in 30 seconds.
We rise before the seas, we rise as tall as trees, we rise not just for you and me, but for all humanity. We rise before the seas, we rise as tall as trees, we rise not just for you and me, but for all humanity. We rise, rise for liberation, we rise, rise for all creation, we rise, rise for liberation, we rise, rise for all creation, we rise before the sea.
This weekend. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we broadcast from San Francisco, California, for the whole week, the site of this week's Global Climate Action Summit. We go back to the streets of San Francisco now to voices from Saturday's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March.
Standing Rock! Long live Standing Rock! Long live Standing Rock! Long live Standing Rock!
My name is Juan Flores. I'm with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. I'm a community organizer. We are located in Kern County, Delano, which for many years has been the city of the fight for farm workers movement. And now we're doing an environmental justice movement. It's very significant. We are on the district of Kevin McCarthy, who it's almost like Donald Trump's puppy in the White House. So it's very significant. It's a man that has a lot of power, but he does not have the will to protect our people. So that's why we're here today, to march, to make our voices be heard, so he can see that this is a bigger movement, and that this movement could very well be coming to his district one of these days.
Talk about what's happened in Kern County.
Kern County is the epicenter for oil extraction and hydraulic fracturing, one of the most extreme methods of extracting oil. 98% of the permits in the state of California for hydraulic fracturing happen in Kern County, specifically in communities that their demographics are on a very disadvantaged side. They're low-income communities and communities of color. Most of them are monolingual, and when they try to defend themselves, they actually fight back just by the fact that they don't speak English. So it's very important that we're here.
Now, you just enjoyed what you consider a great victory. What was that?
Yes, Irving, a small community at the south end of Kern County, has put the toughest oil regulations that are on the law right now, currently on the state of California. No new wells can come to the city without properly being far away enough from residences. That's about 350 feet away from residents. Not even the state of California has that buffer zone. So little space, the state of California thinks that communities don't deserve it.
And how did you score this victory?
Well, you know what? With a lot of community power, people's power. They went out. They have been at it for 4 years. They made sure they win, that they exercise the right to vote, that they put the right people into the council, young, progressive women and men of color that have taken on to the leadership of environmental justice. And finally, this year, they came out with this new ordinance.
A little bit louder, 3. We want justice for our people.
My name's Mia Yoshitani. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific Environmental Network. Based in Oakland, California, we organize with low-income immigrant and refugee communities around the intersection of race, poverty, and pollution.
Race, poverty, and pollution. Can you break that down and specifically talk about the communities you work with and what they're confronting?
Sure. We're talking about communities who have economic conditions that are combined with direct pollution from polluting industries like the Chevron refinery. So the Laotian refugee community that we've been organizing in Richmond, California for 20 years, they face some of the worst economic conditions and the worst polluted air in the state. And so this results in people who not only don't have political power, but they have asthma at higher rates, cancer, all kinds of pulmonary and heart disease, and they are also being impacted by climate change right now. So these are the folks who, climate change, that we always say climate change is a threat multiplier. So if folks are already living in poverty without access to clean and healthy homes, a good workplace, and good living wage jobs, they're also going to be impacted even more by climate change.
So my name is Najari Smith. I'm the founding executive director of Rich City Rides, based in Richmond, California.
You live in the shadow of one of the largest refineries in this country, the Chevron refinery, that had a famous fire a number of years ago. Can you talk about what you're doing around Chevron?
So my neighbor has cancer. My mentor, who's staying with me now, has cancer. He has been displaced out of his home. This is in Richmond, California, in the shadow of that refinery. We can't depend on the refinery to change things. It's been there for years, and it's done nothing to help the people or save the planet or alleviate the devastation to our environment. We've, as community members, have had to be the resilient ones to come up with these answers to the problems that are being pressed on us.
You were recently arrested? So explain what happened to you. How'd you get arrested? What were you doing?
For doing the same civic rides that I do and that we do every Sunday in Richmond. We had a sound bike. The community calls it the music bike. We use it to advertise the rides that we do. We were rolling around, and we were doing our Black Unity ride against racism. In memory, it was a healing ride for Nia Wilson, who was killed at the MacArthur BART station.
You're talking about the subway station here in the Bay Area.
That's correct.
And she was killed by?
She was murdered at that station by a transient white guy. She was 18 years old. Her throat was slashed. So in response, the organizations that I work with, 3 Black-led bicycle organizations, came together to have a healing ride in her memory. We had a moment of silence at the MacArthur BART station. We did the ride that we do every month. We do monthly rides on First Fridays. And as we made it to First Friday, the event, the largest, loudest civic celebration in the Bay Area, monthly one, that's where I was arrested.
For
playing music from the music bike that I use to advertise our rides. The music bike that has been welcomed by the community. We get waves, people come outside, they feel safe, they want to know what's going on, they want to know how they can be a part of it, and for that I was criminalized.
My name is Doria Robinson. I'm a third-generation Richmond resident. I'm also the executive director of Urban Tilth and a member of Our Power Richmond Coalition. So I'm out here today just to make sure our voices are going to be heard. Voices from people who literally live on the front lines. I grew up 5 blocks from the refinery. I've been through 3, big fires that I've seen, that I know. And, leading up to this event, we did a lot of teach-ins in our community with our, youth that we work with, the people and everything, actually talking about, telling them, really almost for the first time for a lot of them, what cap and trade is. And to be sitting a few blocks from a refinery and to learn for the first time how your health is being bought and sold.
Explain how it relates to cap and trade and what cap and trade is. Right. Do a little teaching here for the world.
So as I understand it, cap and trade, buying and selling on the carbon market, companies, corporations who are polluters are allowed to buy carbon credits so that they can continue to pollute in the places that they're polluting. And because of some recent rules, we can't put a cap on how much pollution that is because of what Jerry Brown and everyone in the state government here did. And so that means that people can buy the right to basically pollute and injure our health, right? Like, we're sacrificed for their gain. We don't get anything for it. They build their wealth and their empires.
And how does the Chevron refinery impact Richmond? For people who aren't familiar, you said, we already had 3 fires. Many people don't even know what you're talking about.
Right. So the Chevron refinery has had a whole history of explosions and just negligence of maintenance at their facilities. They've been cited. They were there for 100 years. So they had been entrenched. They influence our politics. They flooded the politics with money. They flood nonprofits and other organizations to make sure that they're kind of silenced and they won't speak out when things are not right. And they're the single biggest point source of polluter, emitter of greenhouse gases in the state of California. 5 blocks from my house growing up.
What happened in the 2012 fire? How many people were injured?
Right. So I think it was over 15,000 people were sent to the local hospitals. I was at my house, and now I live 12 blocks from the refinery, and I could literally stand on my porch and see the flames from my house, blocks and blocks away. It was that big. The whole sky went black. You could see the black cloud from San Francisco, which is 15, 20 miles away, and it just covered everything. This big, black, ominous cloud until the sky was dark and the sirens were going off. And literally that day, we are an urban agriculture organization, and we're out trying to revitalize communities and get people out of their houses from behind their bars and invest in health and try to, deal with some of the other issues that are facing our community. And that day we had just finished working with 40 youth in our summer apprentice program all summer to grow all this food, and that black cloud went across and dropped the noxious chemicals on every single thing we'd done with them all summer. And it just hit them like a brick.
Rebecca Macaro Yakat. I'm from Southern California. I'm from the Pechanga Band of Luiseño Indians. We call ourselves Payam Cuicham.
Can you tell us what your sign says?
It says no Bayou Bridge pipeline. I just came from the swamp. Cherie Foytlin and a bunch of really dedicated folks are fighting the Bayou Bridge pipeline in Louisiana.
My name is Mark Dilson. I'm Oglala Lakota from Pine Ridge. Bayou Bridge Pipeline is currently being constructed through the Atchafalaya Basin. Luela V Camp has been fighting the pipeline, and this is actually the same fight from North Dakota. This is still the Dakota Access Pipeline. The pipeline fight is now in the bayous. It's no longer at Standing Rock. But there are people, indigenous-led resistance movement, still fighting the pipeline all the way down in the swamps and the bayous of Louisiana. And ETP is up to their own tricks. Energy Transfer Partners is still, they bought out the local police as their own private security force.
Can you explain the anti-protest law that was just
This is one of the, in Louisiana, there's a series, it's the latest in a series of ALEC-sponsored bills that is now in effect that essentially says that protesting these pipelines is now critical infrastructure. So people are hitting with felony charges, outrageous fines, escalated bail money. This is the front line of that of the latest series of ALEC bills down in Louisiana.
So my name is Linda Six Feathers. That's my family name. My ancestor was Wiyaka Sapke, which means six feathers. And I'm from the Oglala Lakota tribe in South Dakota. And I'm here today because of the missing and murdered Indigenous women across the Americas. That's from the Canadians, Turtle Island, the United States, Central America, South America, Mexico, and the Pacific Islands. When a person of color, women, go missing, the authorities don't do anything to find them. They always give an excuse that, oh, they're on a drunk or they're just run away someplace. But that's not true. We have found out through the process of investigations from the authorities that these women are part of being human trafficked, sex trafficking, and as well as just being murdered and not looked for. So I'm here representing them to call awareness that these women need to be looked for.
My name is Loan Yumeitolu. I'm from Tonga, and I'm here. I'm also from the Pacific Islands, the great Southern Pacific. And I'm here with the Pacific Islander contingent, Wananui, Edge, Edwaj, Lamoran. The Pacific Ocean is our homeland.
And why are you here? What statement are you making?
You know, when you talk about climate change to us, Amy, we feel it in our gut, because our gut is our homeland. So and we can feel that rupture, we can feel that tearing with our land, with the climate. So that's why we're here, because we're on the front lines. I mean, we're here because we can feel the call.
I'm Samantha Barnett. I'm from the island of Guam, and I'm here to protest against U.S. military contamination and testing of our waters and use of our land. We're here to advocate for an independent Guahan and a free and decolonized Oceania.
Your sign says?
My sign says decolonize, demilitarize, and defend Oceania.
And what is Oceania?
It's a grouping of islands in the Pacific, and we're the indigenous people from those islands.
Are you Chamorro?
Yes.
What can you tell us about Guam and what's happening there now?
Yeah, so Guam is a current colony of the U.S., and right now our people are advocating for our right for freedom. So we're a part of the group Independent Guahan, and right now we're really just trying to organize our community against a massive U.S. military buildup that's being planned.
There is major military bases on Guam.
Right, and there's a lot of training and testing happening in our waters and in our land. Right now, one of our sacred spots is called the Texan, and the U.S. military is planning on building a live fire training range there, which would poison our main aquifer, so it's literally poisoning our people and our water.
Trump says get back! We say fight back!
My name is Adrian Leung. I'm with the Chinese Progressive Association. So rice is traditionally cultivated on flooded paddies, and that emits a lot of methane. And there's been some innovation, genetically modified rice that will make it possible for dry seeding. And Microsoft in 2017 has already bought carbon offsets from rice farmers in Arkansas, Mississippi, and California. And we are very worried as Chinese and as Asian contingent that our staple crop, rice, will be commodified in this way. And we see what happened with biofuels, what happened with other crops that have been commodified, is people lose control of these crops that are central to our lifestyles.
And explain what you mean by Microsoft bought this.
So Microsoft bought carbon offset credits from a voluntary market. And what that means is that they can keep polluting, powering up their data centers by saying that we have offsetted that pollution by helping these farmers to dry seed the rice.
Rise up, tell me what you need, what you really need. How we gon' get it? How we gon' get it?
I'm
Kieran Newman. I'm 21 years old, and I'm here to show solidarity with the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice and the California movement for a just transition to end fossil fuel production.
Are you involved with the lawsuit?
I am indeed. I'm a plaintiff on Juliana versus U.S.
And what is that?
Juliana versus U.S. is 21 youth suing the federal government, claiming that the actions they have taken over the last 60-some years to contribute and support the fossil fuel industry and cause global warming is a breach of our Constitution and is harming our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property.
When did this lawsuit start? How old were you?
I was 18 when I filed as a plaintiff. When we first filed the lawsuit, it was the spring of 2015.
You were suing President Obama at the time?
We were suing the Obama administration. But now we're suing the Trump administration. But the focus is not on the president. The focus is on the whole system that has prioritized money and the fossil fuel industry over the fundamental rights of the people.
We are the people too. A little bit louder, 3. We want justice for our people.
Walter Riley. I'm out here because we have to have everybody mobilizing, and I'm with the 1,000 Grandmothers. My wife is a part of that, and I've been trying to make the fight with everybody else that has to mobilize.
Now, I know another Riley very well, Boots Riley.
You know
Are you
Boots Riley.
any relation to him?
I'm his father.
And what did you teach him?
I taught him to fight. I taught him to organize. I taught him to be a part of the movement for change. And I taught him to have respect for labor and political organizing for change.
Now, I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering what you think about his film by that very title, Sorry to Bother You.
I think it's an absolutely wonderful film, and I think it's something totally unique, as many people are saying. I think it's unique not simply because of the techniques that are involved, but because of the story that he's telling. And he's telling a story of class struggle, of fighting racism, and understanding the nature of who we are, living in a society dominated by corporations that want to profit from our labor, steal our souls, and destroy our planet. And the only way that we can fight back is organizing, and that's a very important aspect of the film. The other aspect of the film, that it's a film for everybody around class struggles, the importance of what it means living in this world as people. And so happens that the people in it are black.
Love each other! We have the solution!
I'm Mustafa Santiago Ali with the Hip Hop Caucus. I work on environment, climate, and also revitalizing vulnerable communities. And I'm here for climate, jobs, and justice today, understanding that we have to take a holistic approach to being able to address the issues that are happening both in our country, to our most vulnerable communities, but across the planet. And it's great to see so many committed artists and grassroots leaders. I've seen some business folks as well, all coming together to say that we can rise, we can make the change that's necessary to address climate change issues.
You worked at the EPA for a couple decades, is that right? You were the first person to publicly quit the Trump administration. Why then, and what do you think has happened to the EPA since?
Well, I left because they were very honest about what they were planning on doing, and I knew that the things that they were doing around air pollution and water pollution were going to be damaging to all communities, but especially our most vulnerable communities. And then when I also saw the various proposals to eliminate science and to weaken climate-related activities, I knew that I couldn't be a part of that. I knew the communities that I had served for over 2 decades had worked diligently to be able to get things in place to make sure that enforcement was happening in their communities. And what we see now is that inside of the Environmental Protection Agency, we see chaos. We see folks who are moving forward on things like the affordable care, whatever it's called now, clean energy. They give a different name for it. We call it the dirty power plan. We know that that's going to have huge impacts. They said 1,400 lives are going to be lost. We know that those are conservative figures. More lives are actually going to be lost. We see that science continues to be weakened inside of the agency. We see that they continue to try and eliminate programs that are so necessary to protect all communities, but especially our most vulnerable communities. So they continue to try to move forward in this dirty fossil fuel agenda. But luckily, we have a number of people who are pushing back, who are standing up. People who are going to use their vote to make sure that folks on Capitol Hill are held accountable and making sure that they're putting pressure on the Environmental Protection Agency.
The people gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the
Traces from Saturday's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice march here in San Francisco. It's believed up to 30,000 people attended. Special thanks to John Hamilton, Carla Wills, R.L. Boone, and Libby Raines. We'll be broadcasting from San Francisco throughout the week, covering the Global Climate Action Summit and all the events surrounding it. This is Democracy Now!, back in 30 seconds. Different Heroes by A Tribe Called Red, featuring Northern Voice. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh is facing accusations of perjury following his confirmation hearing last week. Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont has suggested Kavanaugh lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee during his 2004 and 2006 hearings to become a federal judge. During those hearings, Kavanaugh was asked if he'd seen private Democratic files that detailed strategies for opposing Republican judicial nominees while he was associate counsel in the George W. Bush White House. The documents had been prepared by Democratic staff members and were improperly obtained by a Republican Senate aide named Manuel Miranda. This is a clip from Kavanaugh's 2004 confirmation hearing when he was questioned by Utah Senator Orrin Hatch.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with any documents that appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
No, I was not aware of that matter ever until I learned of it in the media late last year.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with information that you believe or were led to believe was obtained or derived from Democratic files?
No. Again, I was not aware of that matter in any way whatsoever until I learned it in the media.
Do you know if any other associate White House counsels had access to these type of materials that were improperly taken?
I don't know of anyone who was aware of this matter, again, until the media reports late last year.
But you were not?
I was not aware of it.
So that was 2004 when Brett Kavanaugh was asked if he'd seen the stolen Democratic files. Last week, Senator Leahy again questioned Kavanaugh about these documents.
On June 5th, 2003, you received an email from a Republican Senate staffer with the subject line, spying. That is not overly subtle. This staffer appears in over 1,000 documents we received together with both you and Mr. Miranda. She says she has a mole for us, and so forth. None of this raised a red flag with you?
It did not, Senator. Again, people have friends across the aisle who they talk to. At least this was my experience back then. Maybe it's changed. And there was a lot of bipartisanship on the committee. There was a lot of bipartisanship among the staffs. There were a lot of friendships and relationships where people would talk to, I've got a friend on Senator Ted Kennedy's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Hatch's staff, or I have a friend on Senator Specter's staff. That kind of the conversation and information sharing was common. So it did not raise the flags.
Judge, I was born at night, but not last night. And if I had something that somebody said, we've stolen this, or this is how, don't tell anybody we have this, I think it would raise some red flags.
While Kavanaugh may not see a red flag, others definitely do. On Friday, Demand Justice Move On and NARAL Pro-Choice America called for Democrats to seek a formal perjury investigation of Kavanaugh based on his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. For more, we go to Madison, Wisconsin, where we're joined by a former top aide to Senator Patrick Leahy, Lisa Graves. Her new piece in Slate is headlined, "I wrote some of the stolen memos that Brett Kavanaugh lied to the Senate about." Lisa Graves is the former chief counsel for nominations for the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and was Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice, now co-director of Documented, which investigates corporate influence on democracy. Lisa, welcome back to Democracy Now! So explain exactly why you're saying, no, you don't want Kavanaugh confirmed to the Supreme Court. You want him impeached from his federal judgeship.
That's right. I think the question really before the Senate should not be whether he should be elevated to a lifetime position for the next several decades, deciding cases that affect everyone, but whether he should even be on the federal bench. I think his testimony before the Senate has been proven false by the emails that have been released so far. And again, the emails that have come out in this confirmation were not before the Senate back in 2004 and 2006. And even still, the Trump administration and the Bush lawyers are trying to limit access to those emails. The ones that have been provided so far reveal that, in fact, Manny Miranda told Brett Kavanaugh that he had received, for example, a confidential letter that was provided by Democratic staff to Democratic counsel, by Senator Leahy's staff, to other Democratic counsel, and then recited the contents of that letter. Told Brett Kavanaugh to hold that in strict confidence. That's just one of several examples from the small sample of emails that have been released. And so I think what is warranted here is not a confirmation vote, but an investigation into perjury for Brett Kavanaugh, who, by the way, as many people may recall, actually cut his teeth working for Ken Starr, working to try to remove President Clinton for perjury, for lying under oath about sex. And here we have this man who came before the Senate in 2004 and 2006 and was not forthcoming. I think the questions that he was asked were very, very direct about receiving any sort of content that might have indicated that there was information being taken from Democratic staffers. And also, I would say, Amy, that the suggestion that there was sharing of information, that such confidential information by Democratic staff to the Republican staff is outlandish. We were united. The Democrats were united in the Judiciary Committee against the most controversial extreme Bush nominees that Brett Kavanaugh was working on. They were united on the floor to try to protect the courts, fair courts, from those judges. And the idea that this was normal for him to receive secret Democratic talking points and the like is simply false.
I want to go to
Unless
Brett
it was
Kavanaugh
normal because he was receiving those documents.
I want to go to Kavanaugh's 2006 confirmation hearing for the D.C. Circuit. This is the late Senator Ted Kennedy asking Kavanaugh about the Democratic memo stolen by a Republican staffer.
You never saw any of those?
No, Senator, that's correct. I don't know. I'm not aware of the memos. I never saw such memos that I think you're referring to. I mean, I don't know what the universe of memos might be, but I do know that I never received any memos, was not aware of any such memos. So I just want to correct that premise that I think was in your question.
So that was Ted Kennedy questioning Brett Kavanaugh. Lisa, take us back to that time, to exactly the position that Kavanaugh held within the George W. Bush White House, why he was so pivotal around these judicial nominations, what the climate was, and what you understood as a top aide to Senator Leahy at the time of Kavanaugh's role.
Well, Brett Kavanaugh was Associate White House Counsel for Alberto Gonzales at the time, and he played a central role in those nominations fights. At the time, we actually didn't hear from Brett Kavanaugh. It wasn't as though he was contacting us on the Senate Judiciary Committee, the staff. But what was happening within the Senate was that the Republicans had taken over control of the Senate, and they were trying to push through these very controversial nominees to the floor in 2003. In 2002, the fights were similar. Although the Democrats controlled the Senate, the Republicans were pushing very hard, attacking the Democrats for not moving on the nominees that they wanted so badly. And so we knew that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in nominations. We knew that Manny Miranda was involved in nominations. We didn't know until November of 2003 that Manny Miranda had been stealing thousands of emails and messages, content, talking points, letters, memos, and the like from Democratic staff on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And we didn't know until this past week the full extent of the communications, or even part of the extent, I should say, of the contacts between Manuel Miranda and Brett Kavanaugh in the sense of how they were working together. And we certainly didn't know before now until Senator Leahy's questioning and the questioning this past week that, in fact, there were talking points, letters, excerpts from memos that were provided to Brett Kavanaugh, along with other information that would have certainly led any reasonable person to believe that they were receiving secret inside information from Democrats. And he testified in 2004, just 1 month after the Senate Sergeant at Arms issued a damning report about Manuel Miranda's involvement in this matter. And Manuel Miranda at the time, it was a voluntary cooperation investigation, refused to tell the Senate Sergeant at Arms who his White House contacts were. I think now we know why.
I want to go back to Senator Patrick Leahy questioning Judge Kavanaugh last week.
Why would you ever be asked to keep secret Democratic talking points if they were legitimately obtained?
I am looking at these, Senator, and it says, for example, it looks like Biden's staff is asking him not to attend the hearing. I don't know why that.
But look how you received it.
I know, I don't know why that's even confidential, because
whether it is or not, would you consider that somewhat unusual to be receiving from a Republican staff member something marked highly confidential, telling him what he's found out the Democrats going to do?
Well, as I explained yesterday, Senator, my understanding of this process is that the staffs do talk with one another, that they're not camps with no communication.
So that was Senator Leahy questioning Kavanaugh. Do you believe, Lisa Graves, that Senator Grassley, who heads up this confirmation hearing, withheld the documents because he knew that the emails show that Kavanaugh had these stolen documents?
I don't think that Senator Grassley himself knew, but I think that what's happening here is an extreme rush to try to install Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court before the midterm elections and to try to deny the American people and the Senate the information it needs to evaluate this nominee. I know that from the procedural record we've seen over the past month, the past week, that Senator Grassley is trying to ram him through without those documents before the Senate. And in fact, we know from the National Archives that the Senate Judiciary Committee majority has bypassed the traditional process for the release of National Archives materials involving Brett Kavanaugh's emails. We know that the person who's screening those emails has been chosen by the former Bush White House and worked closely with Brett Kavanaugh. And we know that numerous materials that involve these matters were not provided to the committee until just last week. And that's just a sliver of the documents that the National Archives reports are available or would be available under a proper procedural review later this fall that would reveal more information about this matter. And so I think it's imperative that this investigation proceed to look into not just this issue of the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, but what he knew, when he knew it, and the full record about his communications with Manny Miranda and others about secret Democratic files, materials, talking points, and the like. It's a very serious matter to lie to the Senate. It's a very serious matter to lie to the Senate repeatedly.
Lisa Graves,
I think this needs to be investigated.
We have to leave it there. Lisa Graves, former top aide to Senator Patrick Leahy. Her new piece in Slate will link to, I wrote some of the stolen memos that Brett Kavanaugh lied to the Senate about. That does it for the show. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.